What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Chimpact bringing guys my first Pokemon Sun and Moon Strategy DEX. The first Pokemon is going to be Tapu Koko. I'm very excited for this because Tapu Koko is one of my favorite Pokemon in Generation 7, and it's just an amazing Pokemon. I'm really excited. Hope you guys are as well. If you guys could support the video with a like, I would definitely appreciate that. But we're just going to take a look at its stats real quick. It has great speed, decent special attack, great attack, and the bulk is kind of there, but not really. However, one of the things that Tapu Koko has over the other Tapus is that it has access to Volturn and U-turn, so it's a great pivot. It has Roost. None of the other Tapus have access to Roost. It can go physical or special. I believe this is the only one that can do that effectively. It's a great stall breaker with Taunt. Also has access to Roost. And the thing that separates it most from the other Tapus is that it has great speed. It has 130 speed. It's the fastest Pokemon pretty much in the tier. Outside of, not in the tier, but in Sun and Moon, outside of, I believe, two other Pokemon, Pheromosa and probably another Ultra Beast. But the thing about its speed is that it's also a bad thing, because if you're trying to utilize its Thunderbolt to deal heavy damage, you're going to lose out on the terrain if you come in on the same time, on the same turn as another Tapu, because their terrain is going to activate unless they are a Scarfed Pokemon. And the only Scarfed Tapu that I think people would use would be Tapu Bolo, just because it already hits hard and it's a pretty good revenge killer. So we're going to move on into the movesets that Tapu Koko can run. So we're going to go with the Special Attacker. And the Special Attacker, the thing about Tapu Koko is that it doesn't really have a very good move pool in terms of attacking. Like, not a wide variety of attacks. Like, it's a very good mixed attacker, but special attacking doesn't really hit that hard just because it doesn't have the best special attack. But this is the spread that I'm going to go with. Most of the time, you really want to have max speed, but I'm just going to put this spread there just in case you want a little bit of bulk to go with your Tapu Koko. In Generation 6, a lot of Tornadus didn't run max speed. And against opposing Thundurus, you missed out on the KO because their Tornadus was outspeeding your Tornadus every single time, and you really wanted to hit that other Tornadus with Hurricane. And in this instance, it's not really that necessary to hit other Tapu Kokos with Thunderbolts because it's not doing that much damage. But in case the Tapu Koko are low, you really want to be able to outspeed that Tapu Koko and hit it with Thunderbolt or another attack. So max speed is not necessary, but it is recommended. But if you don't want to go with max speed, this is the spread that you would probably run, because 216 speed EVs outspeeds Weavile and other base 125 Pokemon. I believe Weavile is the only relevant base 125 Pokemon. Swellow is also that, I believe, but nobody's really using Swellow in OU. So the first move, Dazzling Gleam, Thunderbolt, Grass Knot, and these are all pretty standard moves. Dazzling Gleam is stab, Thunderbolt is stab, and Grass Knot is just to hit the Pokemon that are immune to your strongest hit, which is Thunderbolt. I forgot to mention the ability of Tapu Koko. It prevents ground Pokemon from going to sleep and increases the power of electric type attacks. And electric terrain is really good because it's essentially a weather ability. And because it's a weather ability, it powers up electric moves more than boost like adaptability would. So adaptability doubles your stab attacks basically, but with electric terrain, your electric type attacks are not not 2 times as strong. They are 2.25 times as strong, so it's slightly stronger, but it really does make a difference. And adaptability is already a great ability, and when you have electric terrain, it just becomes that much better. And then the last move is going to be Calm Mind, Roost, Nature's Madness, or Taunt. Taunt is pretty good just to prevent recovery. Nature's Madness is just to deal a lot of chip damage. Roost, in case you are using Life Orb and you don't want to get chipped down. And Calm Mind is just to power up your attacks. So Nature's Madness is also a new attack. It works similar to Super Fang. It works exactly like Super Fang, except it's slightly better than Super Fang just because Super Fang has one immunity, and that's Ghost, and so you can't hit Ghost types with Super Fang. But Nature's Madness makes it so that you can hit anything. The only thing about Nature's Madness is that a lot of things that are going to come in on Tapu Koko are going to have recovery. So every time you do use Nature's Madness, they're probably going to be able to use Recover. So you got to watch out for that. And the next set we're going to talk about is the Physical Attacker. And the Physical Attacker, I believe, is going to be a little bit better than the Special Attacker, just because it has better attack than special attack, and so it can hit immediately stronger. And this is the spread that we're going to run. The interesting thing about this spread is that you're going to want to have 29 HP IVs if you are using a life orb, because with if you're using a life orb, you want to have your last digit of your HP to have 9 in it, because that means that you take the least amount of life orb recoil, so you're only going to take 27 instead of 28, and it helps a little bit in increasing your survivability. So obviously the first move for your physical attacker is going to be Wild Charge. Wild Charge hits really hard. It does a ton of damage to anything that does not resist, and even if it does resist, it still does a ton of damage. I'll probably put some calcs in the description of this video to show you guys how strong Wild Charge with Electric Drain really is. Move number 2 is going to be Brave Bird. Brave Bird is really cool because Tapu Bulu is a Pokemon that can pretty much switch in against this Pokemon, but with Brave Bird, that is not the case. As well as the fact that Brave Bird can also hit Amoonguss, which is a common Pokemon. Not really a common Pokemon, but a Pokemon that can easily switch into most of the Tapus outside of Tapu Lele and threaten them out just because of its poison type, and it gets access to Sludge Bomb, so it can take those hits and retaliate back. But with Brave Bird, you really do punish the Amoonguss that wants to switch in. Third move is going to be U-Turn. U-Turn is really cool. Allows you to U-turn out, deal a lot of damage just because it has great attack, and it's not as strong as Scizor. But the thing about Scizor is that people, not people, but the Pokemon that are switching into Tapu Bulu or Tapu Koko are going to be switching to its Electric Stab, not to U-Turn. So I guess if they have Steel types that want to come in on this, it's pretty good, but Steel types have to watch out for Thunderbolt. So to each their own. And the last move is going to be Nature's Madness, Steel Wing, or Roost. Steel Wing is really cool because it allows you to punish the other Tapus, but Wild Charge still does enough damage. Steel Wing, I guess, is just for other fairy types, or in case the Wild Charge is not in the Electric Terrain anymore, so it doesn't deal as much damage, and you want to deal a little bit more damage to those fairy types, as well as those rock types, I believe. Do some decent damage to them. And the item of choice is going to be Life Orb or Leftovers, but Life Orb is preferred. Roost is also a great move, just so that you can spam those Wild Charges and Brave Birds a little bit more, just because those are recoil moves and you want to be able to recover that damage off. Nature's Madness is another option, but like I said, most of the time people that are coming in on the Pokemon that are coming in on Tapu Koko are going to have recovery, so Nature's Madness doesn't work as well as you would like. But if they don't have recovery, Nature's Madness plus U-Turn is very solid. Allows you to pivot out and threaten those Pokemon accordingly. Now the third set is going to be the Stallbreaker set, which I think is going to be very effective in this tier. I think it's almost as good as the Physical Attacker. Really just depends on your team. The Physical Attacker really excels with Spike support and stuff like that, but you don't really need Spike support with the Stallbreaker set, just because of how you're going to be dealing with those special or those very bulky Pokemon. So with this spread, 220 HP and 72 SpDef and 220 speed, you're still able to outspeed Weavile and the like. I believe this should be 216 speed and 76 SpDef, but that's fine. You can, edit this on Showdown, no worries. So with 72 SpDef and 220 HP, Tornadus is likely going to be running Sludge Wave now, just because Tapu Koko resists every single common move that Tornadus ran in Generation 6. So Sludge Wave is going to be the coverage of choice over probably Focus Blast or Superpower or even Heat Wave, just so that it can hit the other fairy types in the tier. And fairy types are going to be very common in Generation 7, and Tornadus running Sludge Wave is probably not going to be that uncommon. But with 72 SpDef and 220 HP, you're able to not get 2-hit KO'd by a Sludge Wave from Max Special Attack Assault Vest Torn, and even Life Orb Torn has a chance to not 2-hit KO you with this spread. So ideally, this is the amount of HP and SpDef that you want to run to be able to take those hits from Torn and retaliate back. Thunderbolt, unfortunately, is not going to OHKO Assault Vest Tornadus, but if it can't 2-hit KO you, that's fine, because you can switch in and roost up the damage if you want to, because you'll probably be able to threaten it out with Thunderbolt and probably won't want to stay in. Move number 1, Taunt. Taunt is going to be the best move on a Stallbreaker, just so that you can prevent recovery from this Pokemon, you can prevent yourself from getting status, and it forces them to attack. And obviously defensive Pokemon are not willing to attack you because they don't really have a lot of damage output. Number 2, Roost. You want to be able to recover off the damage that you are taking, so Roost is going to be ideal. Move number 3 is going to be Thunderbolt. You want to have something that deals damage, and Thunderbolt is very, very good. Of course, you really don't want to have Wild Charge, because Wild Charge forces you to use Roost more often than you would like, and although it's a little bit stronger than Thunderbolt is, just because of your special attack stat being lower than your attack stat, you just want your Tapu Koko to survive. That is what a Stall Breaker set does, and if you just survive and be able to taunt Roost up all those defensive Pokemon, you're in the clear. And Thunderbolt still does a lot of damage to Sableye, and Taunt is one of the things that Sableye is not affected by on the stall teams. And move number 4, Nature's Madness, Toxic, or U-Turn. Toxic helps to whittle down those threats so that you don't really need to rely on Thunderbolt. U-Turn, good pivot. And then Nature's Madness. This set works very, very similarly to Crobat, a Stallbreaker Crobat set with Nature's Madness, because Crobat can run Super Fang with Brave Bird and Taunt and Roost. But this works better than Crobat just because it's not weak to rocks. It has better defensive typing, and Thunderbolt is much, much stronger than Brave Bird. Even when invested, Crobat has less bulk than this. Actually, Crobat has more bulk than Tapu Koko, but it's significantly weaker just because of the electric terrain boost that Tapu Koko does have. Obviously, most of the stats in Tapu Koko aren't its attack stat, and because you're not using that, it's a little bit less bulky, but you can deal with that. And the last, another set that is very, very good. And the next set that we're going to talk about is the Pivot Tapu Koko. So the Pivot Tapu Koko is where you're just using it to have decent damage output on your Tapu Koko and be able to set up another Pokemon so that that Pokemon can safely come in and threaten the Pokemon that's currently threatening Tapu Koko. So because Tapu Koko can threaten out so many other Pokemon and can switch into a few other Pokemon just because of its access to recovery, Tapu Koko works really, really well as a pivot Pokemon. Now you can go special or physical. Either of these EV spreads are going to work. It really depends on the moves that you're using. So you can either go Volt Switch or U-Turn first of all, and it really depends on what type of spread that you're going for, and depends on the team support as well. If your team struggles with ground types, you would probably want to go with the Volt Switch just because of move number 2 or move number 3. But Roost is essential just so that you have a little bit more survivability. When you're thinking of Tapu Koko as a pivot, think of Tornadus in Generation 6. Tornadus was a great pivot just because of regen and U-Turn and Assault Vest. And with Roost, you have that regen, but you don't have the bulk with Assault Vest. You just have to rely on your typing. Tornadus' typing wasn't the best just because it was weak to rocks, but Electric Fairy has a ton of resist, and it doesn't have that many weaknesses, and the weaknesses that Fairy does have, you're able to see them coming from a mile away. Like, it's not weak to Steel, but it is weak to Poison, but you can see which Pokemon have the Poison type attacks. Poison type attacks are not going to surprise you in Generation 7, because the Pokemon that are using Poison coverage, it's going to be very, very obvious that it is using Poison coverage. And obviously Ground, but like I said, you can also see Ground moves coming a mile away like Poison types are. So Roost, just to help you with your survivability. Now this is where the spread matters of your Tapu Koko. This is where you go physical or special, because like, it might be odd of me saying that you want your Tapu Koko to be special if you're struggling with ground types, because this thing has Grass Knot. Now Grass Knot punishes those ground type Pokemon, whereas Wild Charge or U-Turn is not really going to punish them as much. So if you don't struggle with ground type Pokemon, you can just U-Turn out into your Pokemon that threatens those ground type Pokemon, and it won't be a problem. But if you do, you want to be able to use Grass Knot to really punish them. Obviously, if your team does struggle with ground type Pokemon, and you can still use U-Turn, it just really depends on the other Pokemon on your team. So Grass Knot or Wild Charge. Wild Charge does have a little bit more damage output, but you do take a lot of recoil damage from Wild Charges because of how much damage the Tapu Koko is going to be doing. So keep that in mind when you are thinking of whether to go special or physical. And then of course Nature's Madness or Stealing. Stealing, like I said, really punishes the other Tapus from coming in, because they're going to switch up the train, so your electric type coverage is going to do a lot less, and you really can't do much about it. So like I said, for the most part you do want to go with max speed. The only set that doesn't need max speed is the pivot set, because the pivot set can take hits, or the stall breaker set can also take hits. The pivot set, I believe you do need max speed just so that you outspeed other Tapu Kokos and Volt Switch, and you turn out into your Pokemon that answers Tapu Koko the best. So, I mean, obviously, if you're slower than other Tapu Koko, you can get the slow U-turn off or the slow Volt Switch off, but you don't know if they're also slow, so it might just be a 50-50 regardless. Nature's Madness is going to be pretty much on all the sets just because of how versatile it is. Like I said, if they don't have any recovery moves on their team or on their answer to Tapu Koko, Nature's Madness just becomes very, very powerful. And they have to think twice about switching in that answer to Tapu Koko just because of Nature's Madness. Alright, and the last set that I'm going to be talking about is the Subcall Mine set. Now, the Subcall Mine set is pretty basic. I don't really have an optimized EV spread for this yet, but if the meta evolves and it becomes more stable, I'll know what moves that you want to take and what Pokemon you want to be able to outspeed. For the most part, you want to pretty much just go max speed on Tapu Koko no matter what, just so that you outspeed or at least speed tie with other Tapu Koko, so you're not in that position to where your Tapu Koko can die to opposing Tapu Koko. So Calm Mind, Sub, Thunderbolt, and pretty much the last moveset is whether you want to be able to take out ground types or whether you want a little bit of recovery, so you're a little bit of a stall breaker. Always want to go with leftovers on the Subcall mindset because you don't really want to lose out on any HP recovery, because when you're using Substitute you're taking 25%, you want to be able to recover that off a little bit. So Grass Knot or Roost, it really is dependent on your team. If your team can handle ground types, then go ahead and go with Roost, but Grass Knot for the most part is superior just so that you're more independent and not reliant on your team. So Pokemon that Tapu Koko struggles with, you gotta bear in mind electric types work really well as partners, but Amoonguss is a great answer to Tapu Koko outside of the physical set where it can use Brave Bird. Steel types in general, just because they threaten Tapu Koko with steel coverage, but stuff like Steelix, I guess, but Steelix is not going to be that common. Hippowdon, a Spit F Hippowdon, I don't know how much Grass Knot does to it, but I believe Grass Knot shouldn't be dealing that much damage. I'm going to run the calc right now. Hippowdon to a Tapu Koko with max special attack, Life Orb, Spadef, Dazzling Gleam looks like it's doing a ton of damage. So Dazzling Gleam does 28 to 34, while Grass Knot does 58 to 68. So Tapu Koko is one of those Pokemon where it's really difficult to pinpoint what type of spread that's running, but Landorus and Gliscor are going to be great answers because Grass Knot don't do that much damage to them, and the physical set doesn't really have a good answer to them, but Nature Power can really do a number to Landorus. Really sets up the rest of your team to deal with the Lander, so that's really good. This is obviously going to be post-bank talk. Pre-Pokebank, I don't really know what Pokemon there are going to be because there's not really a lot of Pokemon available to use, so Tapu Koko is just going to be even that more threatening pre-Pokebank. So that is my video on Tapu Koko. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Please leave a like, and there are definitely going to be more Pokemon strategy dexes for Pokemon Sun and Moon coming soon. And that's it. Peace.